read widely. They'll take up those issues which I was speaking about, but before I begin, I would like to touch on a couple of things about the Northeast. And the Northeast is in the margin, then it becomes all more doubtful whether the Northeast is in India at all. Because geographically, you are in the mainland, you are nowhere away from the mainland. And let us try to conceive a centrality in terms of being where you are and drawing a circle around you, and you are in the center. So wherever anybody is, you draw a circle around you, that is the center. The center travels with you. The center is not a fixed creativity, okay? It's not a fixed construction. With this, I start my discussion. Every now and then we hear that the Northeast is heavenly, paradisal, but remember, every construction of paradise in religious literature and in theology also speaks about things which you expect to do in real life, but you cannot do, and can do it only when you reach the other life, which you have never been able to reach and come back. So the concept of the paradise itself is a very, very cliche concept. Don't attach it to the Northeast. The Northeast is just like any other place on this earth. Just like any other place, just like Goa. People living there, hills, forests, rivers, waters. And people live there, and the people are born with stories. Northeast is famous for one thing, remember. It's not famous for extremism, it's not famous for terrorism, it's famous for one thing. We are all in the Northeast. All the ethnicities of the Northeast, all the states of the Northeast, all the people of the Northeast, we are born with a story. We are a story. We are born with an oral tradition. Our literature begins with the word, starting with a narration of a story. And we are born with stories which tell about ourselves, which are self-reflexive, they tell us about how we originated. And when we speak about the Northeastern stories, remember, we also have a sense of the memory, because the stories are remembered, the stories are passed on from one generation to another. And the stories are something like the Smriti and the Smriti, Smriti and the Smriti sort of structures that you have in the classical literature. The stories are also part of the later construction that we call today as a mnemonical history, history of the memory. Okay? So in the Northeast, we have several communities, tribes, ethnicities. Each of them, within themselves, have a shared archive of social memory. Okay? And all the members of the tribe, they are born with a share in that social memory. And that memory plays a very important part in telling and retelling the stories, in trying to recreate yourself, in trying to reinvent yourself every day. And remember, there's one great thing about the oral stories, about literature, that is, every story that is orally narrated and transmitted is also interpolated. It changes with contemporaneity. So there are strings of new things which come in. The popular folk tales, the popular stories, the popular songs have ingredients from the common life that go on being interpolated through the stories regularly. So in the stories, you also have reflections of the other cultures that are trying to dominate you. You have the stories of intercultural exchanges. You have stories of traveling to a new land. You have stories of carrying your stories with you to a new land. So this is the way in which the entire corpus of the Northeastern literature develops. It grows, and it spreads. It's by the power of the word. If you think about empowering ourselves in the Northeast, it's only through the power of the word. And it's through orature. And when we think about the Northeast, we think in terms of designs, colors, and stories. Motifs. Every distinct Northeastern tribe has a distinct pattern on the dress that they wear, symbolizing their culture, symbolizing certain nuances of the culture. In the Northeast, there is one thing very important. The Northeastern cultures, and we cannot think about one single Northeastern culture, remember, this is an oversimplification, which is very reductionist. You cannot have one single Northeastern literature. It's Northeastern literatures, because each literature is correlated to the culture from which it originates and goes back to. So each of these cultures, each of the literatures have a certain affinity with nature. You have talking animals, you have talking trees, you have human beings transforming into trees. For example, in one of the Kokborok tales, folk tales from Tripura, from where I come from, you have the sense of a lady, a beautiful maiden, transforming into a Chetuan tree, a tree which is known as the Chatin tree in Bengali. In Kokborok, it's known as the Chetuan tree. Okay? You have the transformational myths, you have the myths of origin, you have the myths of correlation, and you have very interesting motifs coming again and again. The death and the rebirth motive, we have the story in Tripura, which is known as the story of the 14 Devtas, where the Devtas are supposed to kill the prince every day, and the prince is reborn at night. So these are archetypal myths that come back again and again in all these stories.
And bright, always young faces. Okay. Yes, Ashish, I would like to take up from where you have said about firstly oral literature and also about the continuity and so on. So I'm from Assam, and Assam, parallel to the oral literature that we are very rich in, even today, we have also had a long history of written literature. And this the two things together, the orality of our literature as well as the written texts that we have almost simultaneously, that has brought in some very interesting dynamics. I would like to mention, because you said about death and rebirth and so on, and so I've been reminded very much of the Tejimola story, right? Tejimola.
I know I'm late because he's so strong.
Actually, the glass fell there, so he got a cold welcome, with which he is not used to.
So, this Tejimola story, Tejimola comes throughout oral literatures and our written literatures, and we have references. I'm just taking one folk tale, which is because Tejimola is part of the fabric of Assam, I would think. Okay? And in very much in brief, Tejimola is, of course, there are stereotypes there, but if you go beyond the stereotypes, you find also a lot of different layers also in there. So Tejimola is basically about the daughter of a merchant who goes away and leaves this young girl to the care of the stepmother. The stepmother does kill her in different ways through different stratagems, but she always comes up again. She's always, she comes to life again. First of all as a plant, then as a bird. And then she goes to her father comes back, and the bird, he realizes that this is his daughter. And again, that's another part of the story, and then she comes back as his daughter. So, death and renewal, as you said, Koshish, it's very much a part of the fabric of our lives. And it's very interesting that this Tejimola story, which is a folk tale which is told to our children even today in the oral tradition, but it has been written about extensively. We read the story.
Or mainstream literature, or why we are not there, or why we are here. It doesn't matter so much as long as yourself and the changing reality of yourself, because you're always going to be multiple. Your reality as a person, the I that you put in novels or poems, is also changing all the time. You're modifying and altering that. So that is always there, but I think as long as you have the honesty of feeling, at that moment, that is what really matters, and that I think is what bridges different cultures, different literatures, different writers, different peoples together, is that you can immediately recognize that honesty of feeling. And of course you use language and words to evoke emotion or to alter us, but initially it is that feeling that connects us.
One interesting thing which came up last time when I was talking to Hazarika out here is that this very notion of Mamang is also referred to as why do we write? Like this very notion of, I was speaking to Dhruba, a therapeutic sort of a thing, like you write because you want to get rid of the thing that is within you. And on this note, I want Dhruba to respond to this very notion of writing for the sake of, relieving the sense of labor, pain, everything, the sense of carrying it.
Thanks, Ashish. Very good morning to everyone. I think I'll go straight to the point. Each writer, I think, has his own devil to write. We carry our own skeletons, spiritual, moral, and sometimes it's a compulsion. Sometimes it's not a compulsion. We play to the gallery. We write thinking that this will be approved by a set of critics or a set of writers or readers. But mostly we write, at least I write, Ashish, because it's a cleansing, it's a purge, it's a prayer to and a meditation. These are grand words in many ways. But then if you don't do that, you're not honest. What Mamang said, you have to be honest with your feelings that particular moment when you were scribbling those lines and putting that comma and that full stop. And it's not as if the Northeastern is a different animal. We are animals, all of us, human beings. But we have been categorized into thinking that the Northeasterner ought to write in a certain fashion, which basically actually undermines the entire role as a writer in the Northeast. But we are compelled by certain circumstances. I would just like to define a few of these. For example, one of our greatest poets in the Northeast, Desmond Cardmoflan, is known as the Tiger Man. He's known as the Tiger Man because he's into the folklore part of the tiger, affecting Khasi lore. Mamang's poems define the rivers in the Northeast. He's got a beautiful book of poems. We have a habit of patting each other on our backs. And I take the liberty for you to pat Mamang here. She's got this fascinating book called River Poems, where she spiritualizes the river, how the river affects everyday lives, the child, the mother, the husband, the fear of being swept away by floods, and then the succor being received from the water that's been given by the streams. Indeed, the Tiger Man, Robin with his excellent deposition on harking back to days when things were peaceful, when there was no violence, when he wanted some sort of an intellectual happiness through the kind of emotional transition that takes place through the geographical transition from Manipur to Shillong. We have historical fiction, plenty. One source of this has been, I will not name the authors because there are too many of them. We have had the Indo-Bangladesh, the 1971 war, which gave rise to a lot of good fiction. When some of them in the, one is Young, that was reminiscent of the Hemingway style through this wonderful writer called Virendra Bhattacharjee, who is a Gatwick Award winner. And in fact, Assam, now that I'm speaking of Assam right now, we have had the novel for the last 120 odd years. The first novel was written 120 years back by a man called Rajni Bordloi.